today we're looking at Joshua chapter 16. And once again, we're continuing in this division of the land that we see after they have gone into the land of milk and honey, and they have occupied, or let me just phrase this, they have been given the land that they were promised. When they were told that when they leave Egypt, they're going to go into the land of milk and honey. And this is into the Canaan land area. And we're going to continue to see the division of these tribes. And what I wanted to do was, even before we get into the reading, just to kind of give a little an outline of where these tribes are located. And if you happen to know, from a geological standpoint, geography, you know where Israel is. And you think about Israel, you would go to the very, very top of the nation of Israel. And if you wanted to draw like a circle at the very top of a piece of paper, and then right at the top you would put Dan. So Dan is the most northern portion, all right? And there's a lot we could say about Dan because Dan has some issues, and Dan is one of the tribes that is left out in the book of Revelation when these tribes are sealed in the tribulation. Dan's tribe is not sealed. And there's a lot as to why that is, but we'll develop that a little bit more at another time. And then you will also see below that you would see the nations of Asher, the tribe of Asher, the tribe of Naphtali, Zebulun. You would see Manasseh more towards the middle, and Manasseh is in the middle on both sides, because remember there was that half tribe of Manasseh that stayed on the other side. So you got half the tribe on one side of the Jordan and the other half on the other side. All right, and then you would have Gad on that other side as well, and Reuben, remember. So they would kind of go towards that middle part on the right side. But then below Manasseh, you would have Ephraim. And right above Manasseh, there's a little spot where you would see Zebulun and Reuben right above them. And then, like I said, below them there would be Ephraim. And then below that, you would have Judah. And then below Judah would be Simeon. Now, Simeon and Judah were kind of intermingled. So you would see a lot of maps where you might see Judah taking up the entire portion of where Simeon is, and then Simeon kind of like in the middle. And then, of course, when the nation divides, right there at the line where Judah is, that's where you will have the northern Israel and southern Israel. So just think, just from a speaking visual standpoint, just to kind of see from top to bottom. So, Judah and Simeon would be considered the very south, and Dan, Asher, and Naphtali would be the very north. And of course, over on the west, you would have Gad, Reuben, and a half tribe of Manasseh as well. So just from a visual standpoint, that's what you will be looking at. So we're going to continue today, and we're going to be looking at the tribe of Joseph. And when you see Joseph, you say, well, I didn't hear you say Joseph. But remember, Joseph was divided into two tribes. And so remember when Jacob saw Joseph's children, his grandchildren, he adopted them as his own. And that's why we have the tribes of Manasseh and the tribe of Ephraim. And then some will say, well, how come we don't see anything about the tribe of Levi? Well, remember, Levi was brought in as the priestly tribe, and so they were not given any land, but they are given cities in the midst of each of the tribes. So Levi is all over the land, but they have like little towns and cities within each of the tribes. So Levi has a decent amount of occupying space as well, but no particular area all their own. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the reading here. Joshua chapter 16. Let's take a listen here. And let me just make sure you can hear it. And there we go. All right, let's take a listen.
Chapter 16. And the lot of the children of Joseph fell from Jordan by Jericho unto the water of Jericho on the east, to the wilderness that goeth up from Jericho throughout Mount Bethel, and goeth out from Bethel to Luz, and passeth along unto the borders of Achai at Ataroth, and goeth down westward to the coast of Japhletai, unto the coast of Bethhoron, the nether, and to Gezer, and the goings out thereof are at the sea. So the children of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, took their inheritance. And the border of the children of Ephraim according to their families was thus. Even the border of their inheritance on the east side was Ataroth-adar, unto Bethhoron the upper. And the border went out toward the sea to Michmetha on the north side, and the border went about eastward unto Teanoth-shiloh, and passed by it on the east of Janohah. And it went down from Janohah to Ataroth, and to Nearath, and came to Jericho, and went out at Jordan. The border went out from Tappuah westward unto the river Cana, and the goings out thereof were at the sea. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Ephraim by their families. And the separate cities for the children of Ephraim were among the inheritance of the children of Manasseh, all the cities with their villages. And they drave not out the Canaanites that dwelt in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwell among the Ephraimites unto this day, and serve under tribute.
All right, so there we go, chapter 16. Now, as you can see, there's a whole lot of just naming of names and towns, and there's not a whole lot of drama listed in here for us to kind of outline and bring forth. So we're going to go through this one fairly quickly. And if we do have enough time, what we may do is just go ahead and look at the other half of Joseph, which is Manasseh, but we'll see what happens. All right, so we start off here, and it says, and like I always try to point out, that when a chapter starts with and, you got to make sure that you have the connecting information if you happen to read it by itself to get an understanding as to the flow of what the chapter is talking about. A lot of misinterpreted scripture can happen when people will just grab a chapter and don't understand that it's talking about a specific item. Well, in this case, it's pretty obvious what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the dividing of the land, and the reason why it starts off with and is because we've already had some land divided. All right, and so it's talking now about this is the lot of the children of Joseph that fell from Jordan to Jericho unto the waters of Jericho on the east. All right, and so once again, we're going to look at this concept. Manasseh and Ephraim were kind of like right smack in the middle of the land. And keeping in mind, Manasseh's on both sides of the Jordan. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And so now they're given this land. And it just, once again, goes through some names that we'll see in verse 2 and in verse 3, which we won't even try to reproduce by trying to pronounce it. But if you look at verse 4, it says, so the children of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, and we talked about why we're looking at that. The reason why we are looking at both Manasseh and Ephraim, because they have been adopted as equals to the tribes. And so that's why they're going to get that. And if you look at that from a standpoint of, well, what happened with Joseph? Joseph is the tribe that got a what? A double portion. Because his name, of course, Joseph, but then he also got Joseph, and he got Ephraim, and he got Manasseh. All right, and so Joseph was given a double portion. And you say, well, why? Well, remember, Joseph was the one that the brothers hated. Remember that? And he was the one that they sold into slavery. And he was the one that was lied on by Potiphar's wife. And he was the one that was forgotten about by the butler when he told him his dream in the prison. But then when God gave Pharaoh a dream, then that butler remembered Joseph, told Pharaoh. Pharaoh called him back up. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream, and it was so wonderful, and you know the story, that Joseph was made second in command. And so even from that, we see that his lineage is giving a double portion. All right. So, and when we continue in here, and you see in Joshua chapter 16 and verse 5, and it says, in the borders of the children of Ephraim. So now we're looking at Ephraim. And it just lists all these borders. And like I said, we read all that. We see that his borders are connecting, and look at verse 7, it's connecting through Jericho, all the way to when they first crossed over the Jordan River. So their borders start there, and so you would look at uh, Ephraim, and they were a wide border. So they would go from Jordan all the way over to the Great Sea, to the Mediterranean Sea, and so their borders were wide, covering from one coast to the other coast. All right. And so as you read this, once again, you're just reading some more information about all the names and the towns and everything, which we're not going to go and look at it and try to repronounce. But if we go down to verse 10, we're going to see something that we saw already. And what we saw in this already was that it says this. It says, and they drove not out the Canaanites. All right, so this is the land that they were coming into, the land of Canaan. And there were Canaanites there, and Ephraim did not drive them out. Now, we've talked about this already, and this is redundant information. We know about what happened previously when other nations didn't drive them out. And they tried a so-called compromise. We're going to do kind of what we were told to do. And so it said they drove not out the Canaanites that dwelled in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwelled among the Ephraimites unto this day, and served under tribute. So what did they do? They turned them into a money-producing situation. And when I say money, not so much that they were paying money, which they probably were, but they also were doing service. So hard labor, the various things that needed to be done, anything that was looked at as unattractive to do or to handle was handed down to them. So mediocre work, slavery, however you want to look at it, it had all its different forms, and some of it was lesser or greater. There was intermingling, there was intermarriage among them, and there were a lot of things that we'll see going forward that we will begin to recognize about this inability to do exactly what God said to do. And that's something that we're going to continue to see as we go through this. And guess what? It's just not in the book telling the story about the tribes of Israel. It's in our lives too. Because there's a lot of things God told us to do that we didn't do, or we didn't do right, or we didn't complete, or we didn't even get started with, or we added something to it, or we took something away. All right, so we have all of those types of things. And that's why we read this, understanding that even as God sees them do this, he still calls them his chosen people. Now, they're going to do even worse things than this, to the point where God will cut off his presence from them, but never remove his promise. And that's something to keep in mind. You look at Israel even today. Israel today is not a nation that's calling on God in a sense like how they used to. And they're not seeking that kind of concept. And there were many times. And plus there was a time when Israel wasn't even a nation. But we do know this. If the word of God is the word of God, and I believe it is, they're going to come back and they are going to call on God in a mighty way. And so that's what we believe, and that's what we believe the Bible is teaching. But yet, at the same time, there's a lot of people that will call on God in their last times, but are pretty bad in the mediocre, in the middle part. You know, some people that got saved, but before they got saved, they were some mean folks, some nasty people. But it's the same thing with some people as far as nations. Israel has not, and we're going to see they're going to do some very awful things that is recorded here in Scripture. And we'll point it out and we'll be like, wow, how can God still, and God's going to say to them, you have done some awful things and I will remove my presence from you. All right? But what he doesn't do is remove what he promised to Abraham, what he promised to Isaac, and what he promised to Jacob. All right, so I think that's something to keep in mind. So no, they didn't kick out the Canaanites that were living in Gezer. They let them stay there, took advantage of them. All right, and that's not a good thing to do. Taking advantage of people wasn't what God had called them to do. All right, any questions on chapter 16?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, now Israel they're on the north side, they're in the north side, but then the northwest side or the northeast side?
Well, Ephraim is on the they're in the central area of Israel, on the west side of Jordan. So you think of the Jordan River, right? And on the east side of the Jordan River, you got the three tribes that said we want our land on this side. So you got half the tribe of Manasseh, the tribe of Gad, and the tribe of Reuben. All right, and so they're on the east side of the Jordan. On the other side of the Jordan River, towards the middle, you have the nations of Ephraim, and then you also will have the nations of Manasseh. All right, and so Ephraim and Manasseh are on the, I would say towards the north, because the most northern tribe is Dan. Then you have Asher and Naphtali coming south below that, and then you have Manasseh and Ephraim coming that way.
They're like in the center of the north.
Yes, they're center. They're central.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, central. That's why I was like confused. But like in the north, it's on the northwest side or the northeast side.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Now,
right.
Manasseh will I think we will have some time to get to chapter 17. Manasseh is on both the east and the west, and they're the northern part of the west of the east side. All right, but when you slide them over into the land of the Israel, they're more central in how that land is divided. All right. All right. Any other questions on chapter 16? All right. If not, let's go ahead and jump right on into chapter 17. Joshua chapter 17. Let's take a listen.
Chapter 17. There was also a lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph, to wit, for Machir, the firstborn of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, because he was a man of war. Therefore he had Gilead and Bashan. There was also a lot for the rest of the children of Manasseh by their families, for the children of Abiezer, and for the children of Helek, and for the children of Azriel, and for the children of Shechem, and for the children of Hepher, and for the children of Shemaiah. These were the male children of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, by their families. But Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, had no sons, but daughters. These are the names of his daughters: Mahlah, and Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they came near before Eleazar the priest, and before Joshua the son of Nun, and before the princes, saying,
The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brethren.
Therefore, according to the commandment of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among the brethren of their father. And there fell 10 portions to Manasseh, beside the land of Gilead and Bashan, which were on the other side Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh had an inheritance among his sons, and the rest of Manasseh's sons had the land of Gilead. And the coast of Manasseh was from Asher to Michmethah, that lieth before Shechem, and the border went along on the right hand unto the inhabitants of En-Tappuah. Now Manasseh had the land of Tappuah, but Tappuah on the border of Manasseh belonged to the children of Ephraim. And the coast descended unto the river Kanah, southward of the river. These cities of Ephraim are among the cities of Manasseh. The coast of Manasseh also was on the north side of the river, and the outgoings of it were at the sea. Southward it was Ephraim's, and northward it was Manasseh's. The sea is his border, and they met together in Asher on the north, and in Issachar on the east. And Manasseh had in Issachar and in Asher Beth-shean and her towns, and Ibleam and her towns, and the inhabitants of Dor and her towns, and the inhabitants of Endor and her towns, and the inhabitants of Teanach and her towns, and the inhabitants of Megiddo and her towns, even 3 countries. Yet the children of Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities, but the Canaanites would dwell in that land. Yet it came to pass, when the children of Israel were waxen strong, that they put the Canaanites to tribute, but did not utterly drive them out. And the children of Joseph spake unto Joshua, saying,
Why hast thou given me but 1 lot and 1 portion to inherit, seeing I am a great people, forasmuch as the Lord hath blessed me hitherto?
And Joshua answered them,
If thou be a great people, then get thee up to the wood country, and cut down for thyself there in the land of the Perizzites, and of the giants, if Mount Ephraim be too narrow for thee.
And the children of Joseph said,
The hill is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites that dwell in the land of the valley have chariots of iron, both they who are of Bethshean and her towns, and they who are of the valley of Jezreel.
And Joshua spake unto the house of Joseph, even to Ephraim and to Manasseh, saying,
Thou art a great people, and hast great power. Thou shalt not have one lot only, but the mountain shall be thine. For it is a wood, and thou shalt cut it down, and the outgoings of it shall be thine. For thou shalt drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots, and though they be strong.
All right, there we go. So, as you can see, with these two chapters, we see the dividing of the land that was given to the tribes of Joseph, and these once again are expressly speaking the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, in 17, we see a little bit more about how these tribes still kind of have an intertwingling. There is some things about them that I think we should point out. One of the things that I talked a lot about was the tribe of Dan, and how Dan was so instrumental in bringing in idolatry within Israel. And as I stated, we're going to go through the rest of this Bible, this Old Testament, and we're going to see Israel do some horrible things. And we're going to see a lot of the tribes. And one of these tribes is Dan, do some very bad things. But another tribe that will be instrumental in forcing the division that will bring about what we will see as the northern and southern parts of Israel is the tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Ephraim. They will be so key into it that at some point the northern part of Israel will be called the Ephraimites, or will be called Ephraim, and the southern part, which will be dominated by Judah, will be called Judah. So we'll see that division even further as we go forth. But as we see here in chapter 17, and once again, a lot of names, and I'm not going to try to read through these names, but we do want to point out some of the things that I think are highlighted here that we should keep in mind. So chapter 17 opens up and it says, There was also a lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph. So it lets us know that Manasseh was the firstborn. All right, but keep in mind, Ephraim is going to be even greater than Manasseh, and that's why the northern part of Israel at some point will be tagged or given the nickname of Ephraim. All right, he was the firstborn, and then it says in verse 2, it says, There was also a lot for the rest of the children of Manasseh. All right, so now why is it saying that? Because once again, when it says the rest of the children of Manasseh, because remember, half the tribe of Manasseh already settled on the east side of the Jordan River. All right, and so now here's the remaining portions of it, and it lists their names. All right, and it goes on, and in verse 3, it brings out one guy that I will bring out. I will bring out this particular person. Look at verse 3. It says, But Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilgad, the son of Machiah, the son of Manasseh, had no sons, but daughters. Now, you can remember we went through this when we were in the book of Numbers, when they were talking about them having the right to have certain inheritances. And they came to Moses. All right, and you can find out, I think it's in Numbers chapter 26, if I'm not mistaken. And it lists the names of these daughters. All right, and look at verse 4, and it says, And they came near before Eleazar the priest, and before Joshua the son of Nun, and before the princes, saying, The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brethren. Now, this is important because once again, this is an aspect about how the law works in the sense of when a problem was brought forth. Sometimes we think, well, God's going to just bring everything out so it works clearly in our mind. But God, what we know, and if you serve God, if you read the Bible, God does not make everything run smooth. Smooth and easy is not God's way. And it is not something that we were told. Number one, we were told we were going to earn our living because of what Adam has done by what? By the sweat of our brow. So there's an aspect to working hard that is part of the ongoing experience of people. Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you said God is not going to make things that are not going to be easy, but originally it would have been easy if it wasn't this disobedience that was done from the beginning. And after that, God showed his favor and his grace again and got us under the dispensation of grace, but we still do what? Disobedient. Because we just keep repeating history.
Right. Well, the relationship that we have, and you're right, if it wasn't for the original transgression, it's hard to say. We can only imagine how wonderful things could be, but they're not. But what we do have, somebody says, well, why would I serve God if God's not going to make it easy? Because God's going to make miracles. See, God is not afraid of hard, and we're going to see this here in a minute. You know, that's why I'm bringing out this whole aspect about easy. God's not afraid of hard, which we are. You know, we don't like things that are hard. We don't like things that are difficult. We shy away from that whole concept. And that's one of the reasons why they have not conquered all of the land. They kind of, oh, you know what, this is good enough. You know, I've heard a motivational speaker one time. He said, he asked the question, what's the biggest enemy that you have for achieving the best you can get? And he said the biggest enemy that you have for achieving the best is achieving something that is good. Because a lot of times to get the best, you have to let go of the good. But once we get good, we're like, you know what, this is good enough. This is good. And sometimes we get good and then we get better. And when you get good and better, you happy. I'm not trying to work or do anything else. Why should I do anything else? I got it good. And matter of fact, it's even getting better. But staying in the land of good, staying in the land of things being better than what they used to be, will never get you to great. Will never get you to the best. And so you're never going to get the best if you just be satisfied with good. And that's what happened with Israel. They got into the land and they recognized, well, these people aren't really fighting back that hard. You know, and they actually are kind of like us and they appreciate us and they're willing to work and serve us. And they agreed to just be, you know, this is good. We can keep this going. All right. And so you got to make sure that you don't get comfortable in the good to ignore or sacrifice the best. Yes, Wayne.
Yeah, on my way, I had to use the bathroom. On my way to the bathroom, you said the word idolatry?
Yes.
Yes, I don't know what that means.
That means worshiping any God besides the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Okay, well, I was right then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, so we see here that now the daughters here of in this tribe of Manasseh, there was one man who didn't have any sons, and according to the law of God, that he said this is how we're going to divide out things that are going to be given out to the sons. And when the daughters saw, well, we don't have a man, and so they came out and they made a statement. And this is important to do because once again, things are not always going to be super easy and predictive. So you didn't got to believe. Now, these women said, there's no precedent for this. This has never happened because we never had a situation like this. But they didn't just say, well, you know what, we'll just let it be. That's just the way things are. No, they brought it to God. They brought it to Moses, and they told Moses, hey, shouldn't we have something? And that's a blueprint for us. Just because things that, well, nobody does it like this, or nobody has ever done this or achieved this, is not a reason to say, well, I guess we then should quit. It's a reason to bring it to God and see what God says. And when these daughters brought this issue about the inheritance to Moses and to God, God told Moses, yeah, they are correct. you give them a portion of the land when they get there. And so now they're claiming it. They're saying, don't y'all forget this now. This was a promise made to us. And these women are now reminding Eliezer and reminding Joshua that we have a right to the inheritance. Put our name on the deed. Right? But they had to go forth and do things. And now what does this once again point to us? It points to us to say, we have to believe God. Don't think that, well, God made it so wonderful and all we just got to do is show up. No, you got to show up and you got to trust God. Well, things are not going the way I think it should go. Well, go to God. And see if God can bring forth a difference. And sometimes that's the point of where we don't go. We're like, well, I guess it's still good enough. I got land. We just, maybe we'll just integrate our land with the land of the other tribes, and we'll have it, and we'll have a nice place. But no, that's not what is actually there for you. There is better. There is a best situation. So you got to sometimes speak up and say something and go to God. And God, is this, what we're supposed to have, or is there something that we should have that is better than this or greater than this? Do we have a best? And that's
so this leans towards questioning God.
You bring your heart to God. You bring your request to him. Yes.
Yeah, piggybacking on what Brother Matthews was saying, because some people could get the wrong idea. They said I can question God and get him to rethink it. God is not rethinking it, right. But he's allowing it to be in his will. And whatever measurements that God has for whatever decisions he's making, it coincides with his will, and he allows it. Right. It's not like I'm going to change God's mind, or I'm going to just bring this precedence and then he's going to say, ooh, let me check it out. No, that's not happening.
Yeah, that's true. It's not a sense of God changing. God brings us things that are difficult a lot of times, or different, for us to understand that digging and going through the hard things are important. It's kind of like, you look at, how certain nuts are. A lot of nuts are set up to where the shell is easy to open, but not all nuts. Some nuts are hard as rocks. You see a coconut and you're like, oh, this is a big old heavy piece of wood thing. Ain't nothing here worth it, and you don't take the time to crack it open. You'll never get that coconut or that coconut juice or the white meat inside the coconut. You have to be willing to crack it open. And God says, he has given us more things, and it's not that God is changing. He's like, I already know what I've given you. I just want to know if you're going to go and crack it open. Are you going to open up some of the stuff, or are you going to be like, you know what, that's too easy. Let me just find the simple peanuts and the little teeny weeny ones that I can open up. But will you open up the coconuts? And those are the ones a lot of times that have the most juice, the most meat in it. But you got to be willing to do the hard work. And not everybody's willing to do that. Hey, with that, so you have a question or comment?
Yeah. Now, I was just thinking that you're seeing God's grace even in the Old Testament. You're seeing his unmerited favor. Even in the Old Testament, where he had all these laws where if you did certain things, he would say, okay, that's it. Your history. If you did a certain thing, like if you committed adultery, they just put you up, stone you to death, and that'd be the end of it. But you can still see his grace and mercy in the Old Testament.
Yeah. He showed it through the whole Bible.
Yep.
His grace and mercy has always been there. It's just that if you didn't obey his will in the Old Testament, he didn't go for it. It's not like he didn't give you a second chance back then, the way Jesus had made it for us to have a second chance. See, without our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, we wouldn't have a second chance now.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't have any chance.
We wouldn't have any chance.
That's right. That's for sure. So you see this problem that came up, and this came up while they were traveling, along with Moses. But they brought the problem to the Lord, and the Lord's like, okay, you crack that nut open, and you see there is some provisions for you inside there. And so those daughters, even though there were no sons, they didn't have any brothers, they still got land. And God knew that he had to allow that. And why does God allow that to happen? So we can see. It's a lesson to us. Okay, so we look at it and go, well, this don't ever happen for people like me. It don't never happen for people in my circumstance or my situation. Yeah, well, it never happened for these daughters either, these daughters of Manasseh. But they got and found a way. But we'll see this again. This particular 17th chapter deals with this on several ways. All right. And so they ended up getting their portions. They were given 10 additional portions, and we saw that. If you look in verse 5, you see that they were given some land, 10 addition, near Gilgad and Bashan. All right, and then they give you some other names of the areas. And in verse 10, you see that they were given some areas southward, towards the borders of Ephraim on the north, and then also towards the border of Asher, and towards the border of Issachar. So they had a lot of borders. They were a big area. And like I said, Manasseh and Ephraim had big areas. And they were given some areas around Endor. And Endor is something to keep in mind. You can underline that because that's an area, once again, like I said, they did a whole lot of mischievous stuff as they move along in the Bible. And we're going to see some problems here with this area, because there's a witch of Endor that we're going to actually be introduced to, but that's way down the road once we get into where Samuel will get his
So
chance
I'm
to
trying
see.
to find out here, how many daughters did he have?
Well, it names the daughters here. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 that were named. There may have been more, but we got 5 that were named. Okay. All right. So if you go down to verse 12, it says, "Yet the children of Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of those cities." Now, doesn't that sound familiar? Once again, it's kind of convenient. You know what? We can keep them here. They can do the kind of work we don't want to do. And that makes it what for us? Easy. That's the road we always travel. Right? We seem to want to go. Everybody's looking for easy street. All right. And so they didn't drive out the inhabitants of the city, but the Canaanites would dwell in the land. Yet it came to pass when the children of Israel waxed strong. And what does that mean? They kept getting bigger. They kept multiplying. That they put the Canaanites to tribute. All right. We're bigger, stronger than you. So we're going to make you work for us. Make it what? Easy for us. Put you to tribute so we're going to get value out of your work. But did not utterly drive them out. All right. So we see that. Now, look at verse 14. "And the children of Joseph," and remember, when it says the children of Joseph, it's speaking about both the what? Ephraim and Manasseh, right? All right. "And so the children of Joseph spake unto Joshua, saying, Why hast thou given me but one lot and one portion to inherit, seeing I am a great people?" Now already they already got the mind that I'm what? I'm great.
Great.
All right. Now we know that that's something that you want to be confident, but you need to recognize I'm not great. God is great. All right. So I underline that because I'm like, okay, that's not something that you want to use as a means of saying I deserve something because I'm great. But that's the line they chose to pick. But look what happens. We are great people, for as much as the Lord have blessed me hitherto. All right. So then they actually say, I am blessed because the Lord has made me great. All right. But look what they say. Verse 15. "And Joseph answered them, if thou be Joshua, yes. And Joshua answered them, if thou be a great people, then get thee up to the wood country and cut down for thyself there in the land of the Perizzites and of the giants, if the mountain of Ephraim be too narrow." All right. So now what he's telling them, there is land there. You're just looking at the land that's already kind of ready for, habitation. You got enough land, but you got to go and do what? Some extra work. You got to go and cut down some of them trees and pull up them roots and utilize that land. You can use the trees for building and for lumber and stuff, but that's going to require work, right? And plus, you're going to have to, go up in the mountains, and you're going to be dealing with the what? With those giants that live up in there, right? Folks don't like dealing with giants. We don't like dealing with giants. Big problems that are what? Bigger than us. Those are not fun to deal with. All right, look at 16. And the children of Joseph said, the hill is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites that dwell in the land of the valley have chariots of iron. So that's why it's not big enough, because we don't want to deal with the what? I don't want to deal with this special technology that they got. They got chariots of iron. Right? We don't have that. Both they who are of Bashan and their towns, and they who are in the valley of Jezreel. 17. And Joshua spake unto the house of Joseph, even to Ephraim and to Manasseh, saying, Thou art a great people, and hast great power. Now, what Joshua is letting them know, your greatness and your power is because of what God can do for you. All right, but look what he says here. Thou shalt not have one lot only. So it's like, you don't have to have one lot. If you believe that God has made you great, has given you power, you don't have to be satisfied with one lot only. Okay, then he says, well, what should we do? Look at 18. But the mountain. Okay, first of all, you underline mountain. Why? Because that means you got to climb. It's not smooth. You got to go up. You're fighting right off the bat. You're fighting against what? Gravity. That means when everything else is falling down, you're trying to go what? Up. And that speaks to us. Right? When the whole world, and all the countries, and all the societies, and all the towns, or even on your job, or whatever, everybody else is going down, gravity's pulling them down, you got to do what? If you want God's best, you got to do what? Go up. You got to go up to the mountain. Then when you go up to the mountain, mountain shall be thine. All that's going to be up. For it is a wood. All right, so that means you got a wooded area, and thou shalt cut it down. So now you got to do work while you're fighting against. So you're fighting against gravity, and you're trying to remove. What's the phrase they use in the Bible? When something is ingrained in the person, it's oh man, why can't I remember that? Stronghold. You got a stronghold. All right, so you're fighting against gravity, and you got strongholds. That's what these trees were representing. These things are what? Rooted in. So now, I'm already fighting against gravity. Now I got to pull out all of these strongholds. Well, who wants to live like this? I mean,
What is the stronghold?
A stronghold can represent anything that fights against God that's hard to remove, but can be if you put forth the effort that God will offer. So, gravity is a natural thing. Trees with roots in them that go deep is a natural thing. But God works in the what? Supernatural. Remember, Jesus said, if you have faith of a grain of mustard seed, you can say to a mountain, be thou cast out and thrown into the yonder sea, and it will be done for them that believe and trust God. So, once again, you got to be willing to put this kind of effort and work in it. Will you do what needs to be done? You say, well, what should I do? How do I do it? That's for God to tell you for that specific task. So if God is leading you somewhere and he's giving you an area, well, it's already hard to go up the area, and I go in there and I find stuff that I can't remove. I can't fix it. But God will give you the wisdom and the knowledge to learn how to develop means to get it done. And so Joshua was
now you see that's beautiful, because just what I just said before about his grace and mercy, God had already made them a great people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they shouldn't have anything to worry about. God has already given you the power to do the things that you need to do.
Yep. Yep. But they are dealing with these things here that we're looking at, and your point is very good, Wayne. I'm gonna touch on that point in a minute, but let me finish this verse here, and I'm gonna go back to your point. So we're dealing with the mountain high. We got the trees need to be cut down. All right. And the outgoing of it shall be thine. If you do that, if you take the trees out, you remove the stronghold, the outcome or the results of that will be yours. For thou shalt drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots, and though they be strong. Now, let's outline the problems here. We already know that we were dealing with the mountain. We're fighting against gravity. We're dealing with the trees. We're fighting against strongholds. We also got folks that have technology. They're not dumb people. They know how to make chariots of iron. Right? And we know that they are strong. Well, why are they strong? Well, we already told they're strong because they're what? They're giants. So, what are you going to do? Are you going to, you know what? I'm tired. I don't feel like fighting this no more. What does the Bible tell us about not being weary in what? And well-doing. But can you get tired? Can we identify with the children of Manasseh and Ephraim here, the children of Joseph? You know, when all of a sudden, now, wait a minute. Judah didn't have no trees to move. I don't see anywhere where Judah had to go out and remove trees. I don't see where Issachar or Dan, they didn't have to go out. But they didn't have the area that you have. You got a bigger area. So if you want to occupy that bigger area, you're going to do more. You want more? Guess what? You're going to have to do more.
Much is required.
To whom much is given, much is required. Exactly. Yep. And so the concept of doing in the midst of difficulty, and that's what this chapter here is bringing out. And like I said, these can be very boring chapters when you just read it by the name. But if you look at the content in here and try to bring it out about this whole inheritance that is given, you got to go and you got to do it. Now, let me ask you this: if somebody told you that somebody passed and they left you an inheritance, and the inheritance is in their house, but their house is in Seattle, Washington. Now, you are in New York. Seattle is on the West Coast. You're on the East Coast. Are you going to say, well, you know what, that's too far for me, and that inheritance may be a couple thousand or several $100,000 or maybe $1 million, and you're going to be like, yeah, well, that's a lot. I gotta go across the entire United States to go get that inheritance. No, you don't gotta go. You can stay right there right here in New York and never go get it. But if you think it's worthwhile, you will do what? Now, I guarantee you, every one of us, if we were told that we had $1 million of inheritance, but we got to go to Seattle, we'd be on the first plane we could get to get out there, to get the money. Why? Because we see it as valuable. So what you put value on, you will also put energy behind. So if you don't go up the mountain, then you don't think the mountain is valuable. If you're not removing the trees, then you don't think the land will be valuable once I remove the trees. Because you're not going to put the energy behind it. So a lot of our motivation is triggered by how valuable you think it is. We come together and we spend time week after week after week after week after week going through this Bible one verse at a time. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of energy. That's a lot of effort. Why are you doing it? Because you see value in it. You think it's worthwhile. I definitely believe it's worthwhile. It has changed me. It's an inheritance that God has offered. but it's in a nut, like a walnut, like a coconut that you got to crack open to get the goods. And that's how this word of God is. If you crack it open and dig in there and keep digging, you're going to find, wow, I dig another layer and I find more good. I keep digging again and I find something else good. So it speaks to us again. God has given this to us. He's given us all the inheritance. If we will take the time and if we see the value of going against gravity, removing the stronghold, fighting against the technology, dealing with the strong giants, and still going forward in the name of the Lord. I'm not going to get the victory because of how big and bad I am. I can only be labeled big or bad because God has empowered me. God has given me the strength to do. And so that's something we should always keep in mind. And so when we read these scriptures here and we see how these tribes settled, they didn't get everything. Now, why would God give you something that's hard? Because if you will make up your mind to do it, it will help you down the road. Now, what we're going to see here, when we get further along in our study, them not doing the hard work now is going to cost them down the road. And that inheritance that they could have had, it's not going to be passed down to their children. You see, the removal of the trees, what's going to happen? All the trees are going to do is keep growing, getting bigger, taking up more land. But if you do the work now, guess what you can do? When you pass it down to your children, you can pass it down to them with the work already done. But you can't pass something down to them that you haven't done. You can't give somebody an inheritance that you didn't actually produce. So you then have less as a legacy to give. And so the hard work that you do now will benefit not just you, but multiple generations. And sometimes we forget that. We overlook that. All right. So with that, we're going to stop. I think I've exhausted that. I think this is these two chapters, chapters 16 and 17, they bring out some very interesting points, although, it's, 80% of it is just talking about, names and towns and stuff like that. But if you dig in here and you crack this nut open, you'll find some good value in here. And I thank God for that. Any other comments or questions on what we talked about today?